Lisa was stuck in yet another endless traffic jam, just like so many other days. But there was something different about that day, something she couldn't quite name. The sound of honking horns, which had always been just annoying, now resonated more deeply, like an echo reverberating inside her, amplifying a restlessness she could no longer ignore. She looked around, seeing the sea of cars ahead of her, all motionless, trapped in the same chaos. With every passing minute, Lisa felt as though she was being suffocated by the routine. A frantic race with no direction. Traffic, usually just a passing inconvenience, now seemed to reflect something bigger. What was really happening inside her? Why did it suddenly feel like her whole life was stuck in the same state of stagnation as those vehicles? In that moment, something inside Lisa began to stir. She knew it wasn't just the traffic, the daily frustration, the stress, the constant attempts to get somewhere. It wasn't just external. There was a growing sense that something needed to change. Not in the street, not in the cars, but inside her. Yet she didn't know how or where to start. Lisa, a woman in her early 30s, was always known for her determination. She worked in an office downtown, dealing with tight deadlines, endless meetings, and goals that seemed never to end. Every morning, the same battle began. The traffic, the red lights, the impatient drivers. Every time she got in the car, it was as if she donned armor to face the daily war of congested streets. But this armor, meant to protect her, was starting to weigh her down. Lisa found herself increasingly drained. The hours spent in traffic left her exhausted before she even arrived at work, and the drive home was even worse, as if the road represented an insurmountable barrier between who she wanted to be and the life she was living. In recent months, something had shifted inside her. The things she had once been able to tolerate with a certain resignation now deeply irritated her. She felt like she was constantly running but never getting anywhere. Traffic was just a metaphor for the chaos in her mind. The external rush mirrored an internal impatience, a search for something she could barely define. She knew she couldn't go on like this. The stress was slowly consuming her, turning her interactions with those around her, coworkers, friends, even her family, into brief bursts of irritation. She avoided thinking about it, believing everything would be resolved with a day off or a new organizational strategy. But the truth was, Lisa was on the brink of a breakdown, even if she didn't want to admit it. Life seemed to move too fast in some areas and too slow in others, and Lisa was stuck between these two opposing speeds, unsure of how to escape. Every traffic jam, every honk was a cruel reminder that the control she so desperately sought was far out of reach. That morning, when Lisa stopped at a red light, something unexpected happened. As she gazed at the traffic light, lost in thought and frustration growing in her chest, she noticed a calm figure sitting on a bench by the sidewalk. It was a man of indeterminate age, dressed in simple clothes, yet he exuded an unusual serenity. His eyes were closed, and a faint smile played at the corners of his lips. He seemed completely unaware of the chaos around him. The traffic, the noise, the rush. Lisa was intrigued. There was something about him that caught her attention, something that made her break away from the whirlwind of thoughts that always accompanied her. The light turned green, and the cars started moving. But Lisa hesitated for a second. Without really knowing why, something inside her prompted her to offer the stranger a ride. She pulled her car over to the curb and rolled down the window. "Do you need a ride?" she asked, surprised at her own words. She never did this. She never talked to strangers, let alone offered them rides. But in that moment, something was different. The man slowly opened his eyes and looked at Lisa with a calmness that seemed to radiate from his very being. He didn't reply immediately, just observed her for a few seconds, as if he were evaluating something beyond words. Finally, he gave a slight nod, stood up from the bench, and got into the car. The moment he settled into the passenger seat, Lisa felt as if the air inside the car had shifted. There was a lightness, a serenity that didn't match the chaotic atmosphere of the traffic. The man, who she would soon learn was named Jin, didn't say anything right away. He simply looked out the window, observing the traffic jam with an almost curious gaze, as if he were seeing something entirely different from what Lisa saw. "You seem to be at war with the traffic," he said after a silence that felt longer than it really was. His voice was calm, almost like a gentle breeze on a hot day. Lisa let out a heavy sigh. "It's impossible to stay calm here. I'm always late, always rushing, and nothing ever gets better." Jin didn't respond immediately. Instead, he watched the cars ahead. Then, with the same tranquility, said, "What if the traffic wasn't the problem?" Lisa frowned. "What do you mean? Are you saying I shouldn't stress?" The monk turned his gaze to her, but without judgment or haste. "No. What I'm asking is, what happens inside you when you see this line of cars?" Jin's question lingered in the air, like a subtle vibration that echoed within Lisa. She had never thought about it that way. Traffic had always been an external barrier, something she had to fight against. But what was happening inside her. After a moment, she replied, I get frustrated. I feel like I'm wasting time, like my life is being wasted. Jin nodded again, as if he had been expecting that answer. What if the traffic was your teacher? Lisa looked at him, surprised. Teacher? How could traffic teach me anything? Jin smiled slightly, but said nothing for a moment. He just looked at the long line of cars ahead, watching the slow flow as if contemplating something grand and simple at the same time. Traffic is like life, he began, still gazing at the road. You don't control the speed of others, nor the pace at which things flow. But like a river, you can choose whether to fight against the current or go with it. And amidst this chaos, there's a space between one thought and the next, between one honk and another. That's where you find peace. Lisa sat in silence, absorbing his words. Traffic had never been anything more than an annoyance, a daily battle. But now, with Jin beside her, it seemed like there might be something more. What was he suggesting? That the traffic, with all its chaos, was actually a reflection of what was happening inside her? The silence between them was comfortable, but carried a weight that Lisa couldn't quite explain. The traffic continued to crawl along, but now, with Jin beside her, she started to view it different. His question still echoed in her mind. What's happening inside me? She had never thought about it before. Traffic was just traffic, something external. But now, with Jin's simple act of putting into words what she had never dared to question, everything seemed more complicated, or perhaps simpler than she had imagined. You said traffic is like life. Lisa broke the silence, turning her head to Jin, who was still calmly watching the road. But what does that really mean? Jin looked at her, his gaze serene, without the urgency of someone trying to impose a truth. Have you ever noticed how, in traffic, we try to rush the journey, as if getting to the destination is more important than what happens along the way? Lisa was silent for a moment, thinking. She remembered the countless times she had gotten frustrated, honking, switching lanes desperately, trying to move just a few more meters ahead. It was always about getting there faster, about escaping the chaos. Yes, but who wouldn't do that? No one wants to be stuck in traffic, she said, almost defending herself from the suggestion that there was something wrong with trying to hurry the journey. And what happens to you when you try to rush? Jin asked, his voice calm but full of meaning. Lisa thought for a moment. I get stressed, irritated. It feels like every minute in traffic is a waste of time. Jin nodded, as if her response was the first step towards something deeper. What if traffic wasn't an obstacle, but an essential part of the journey? What if, instead of rushing, you found something valuable in the midst of the chaos? Lisa looked at him, surprised. She had never thought of traffic that way. To her, it had always been the enemy, a barrier between her and what she wanted to achieve. Are you telling me I should enjoy being stuck in traffic? She laughed, not entirely believing what she was hearing. Jin smiled back, but the depth of his question remained. It's not about liking or disliking. Traffic just is, like the things in life we can't control, but we can choose how we respond to it. Traffic can be an opportunity. Every stop is a chance to breathe, to reconnect. Each red light is an invitation to return to yourself. Lisa fell silent again. The idea that traffic, something she had always hated, could be an invitation to something deeper, something internal, was hard to accept. But at the same time, it made a strange kind of sense. Jin continued, still looking ahead, observing the stopped cars as if they were part of a grand dance he already understood perfectly. Traffic is like the river. You can fight against the current, trying to control the speed, or you can flow with it. The peace you seek isn't at the end of the road, but here, between one car and the next, between one honk and another, between one thought and the next. In that space, Lisa, you find peace. The metaphor hit Lisa like a revelation. She had always fought against traffic, against time, against her own life. But what if she could stop fighting? What if instead she could accept the flow, find tranquility in the midst of chaos? But how? She asked, almost without realizing the words had slipped from her lips. How do I do that? Jin looked at her with a lightness that seemed to carry infinite wisdom. Each time you stop, breathe. Don't try to be somewhere else. Be where you are. Feel the steering wheel in your hands, the air around you. When traffic stops, don't see it as an interruption. See it as a pause to reconnect with yourself. It's there, in those moments, that you'll find what you're looking for. Could Lisa really find peace in traffic, or would she fall back into her old patterns? The traffic jam seemed endless, and the sun was already beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Yet, Lisa didn't feel the same urgency as before. Something inside her was shifting, albeit slowly. Jin's words echoed in her mind. The peace you seek isn't at the end of the road, but here, between one car and the next, between one honk and another. She looked ahead, observing the stopped cars, Before, each line of vehicles had seemed like a wall, blocking her from moving forward. Now she tried to see what Jin saw, a river flowing at its own pace. Instead of gripping the steering wheel tightly, as she always did, Lisa relaxed her hand. She took a deep breath, feeling the air enter and leave her lungs. For a moment, she managed to feel calm. The sound of the horns was still there. The traffic was still chaotic, but inside her, something was starting to settle. Every time traffic stopped, she closed her eyes for a second and breathed. Maybe Jin was right, she thought. Maybe I can find peace here in the midst of all this. But the calm didn't last long. A car behind her started honking repeatedly, pulling her out of her momentary trance. Lisa felt the frustration rise again, like a wave about to swallow all the serenity she had built. The urge to honk back, to shout, to react to the chaos was there, present, as it had always been. She looked at Jin, who remained unfazed, as if the noise didn't affect him at all. The monk watched her in silence without judgment, but his eyes conveyed a clear message. This is the test. How will you respond? Lisa gripped the steering wheel, feeling the familiar heat of anger rising in her throat. Why is this so hard? She thought. I'm trying, but this chaos, these people, she wanted to explode, to fall back into her old pattern. But then she remembered, every stop is a chance to breathe. Peace isn't at the end of the road, but here, now. She took a deep breath again, closed her eyes for a brief moment, ignoring the persistent sound of the horn behind her. The anger was still there, pulsing in her chest. But instead of letting it take over, Lisa observed the feeling as if she were an outsider. It's just another thought, she recalled Jin's words. Just another emotion that will pass, like traffic. When she opened her eyes, the honking was still there, but the urgency within her had lessened. The traffic began to move, and this time, Lisa didn't feel the need to rush. She allowed herself to flow with the rhythm of the city, just as Jin had suggested. The monk glanced at her with a slight smile on his face. The traffic is still the same, isn't it? He said, his gentle voice cutting through the noise around them. Lisa nodded. Yes, but something inside has changed, she replied, touching her chest, where there used to be only frustration. Had Lisa truly overcome her old habit, or was this change only temporary? The traffic finally began to flow more steadily. Lisa drove in silence, her mind less burdened than when she'd first gotten into the car that morning. There was a lightness she hadn't felt in a long time. Every time traffic stopped, Jin's words echoed softly in her mind. Peace isn't at the end of the road, but here, now. They were nearing Lisa's destination when Jin suddenly broke the silence. You know, Lisa, the real journey is never about the destination. It's about how we choose to walk the path. Lisa nodded, still processing what had happened during that short drive that had felt like an eternity. I think I'm starting to understand, she said, her voice calmer, almost as if she were talking to herself. The traffic is still there. The chaos still exists, but now I see the problem wasn't what was outside of me. It was what was happening inside. Jin looked at her, his eyes shining with the wisdom of someone who had walked many similar paths. The traffic, the challenges, the frustration, all of it is part of life's flow. Peace isn't something you find at the end. It's something you carry within you, no matter what's happening outside. Lisa was silent for a few moments, letting Jin's words sink into her heart. She looked at the traffic ahead, now with a new perspective. The horns were still blaring, the cars were still moving slowly, but inside her, something had shifted. She took a deep breath, feeling the air move in and out of her lungs, and allowed herself to smile. They arrived at Lisa's destination. She stopped the car and turned to Jin. Thank you, she said, feeling that the words were small compared to the transformation that had begun inside her. Jin smiled back, with that look that seemed to see beyond the present. Remember, Lisa, the traffic is just a metaphor. The real journey is within you. With those words, Jin stepped out of the car and disappeared into the busy street, as if he were part of the city's flow, as if he himself were the river that moved with the current. Lisa sat in the car for a few minutes, watching the city around her. The traffic was still chaotic, the noise still there, but inside her, something new had been born, a calm she never knew existed. But would that calm last? Would she be able to keep applying what she had learned in the days to come? Or would the old patterns of stress and frustration return? She didn't have all the answers, and maybe she never would. But in that moment, she knew one thing. Every time the traffic stopped, it would be a new opportunity, a new chance to breathe, to reconnect, to remember that the journey, not the destination, was what really mattered. And you? How many times have you found yourself stuck in traffic, not just on the street, but in your life? How do you react when the world around you doesn't move at the pace you want? Maybe traffic, or any everyday frustration, can be an invitation to stop, breathe, and find a moment of calm in the middle of the rush. Are you ready to accept that invitation? If you like this story and want to learn how to apply these and other Zen techniques to deal with the chaos of modern life, I have a surprise for you. We've prepared an exclusive ebook with simple yet transformative practices perfect for your daily routine. The link to download it is in the first pinned comment. Don't miss out on this opportunity to transform your relationship with stress and the hectic pace of life. Oh, and if this message resonated with you, don't forget to leave a like and share it with someone who might need a bit of calm amid the chaos. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more content that will help you find more balance and inner peace, even in the most challenging situation. And your learning journey doesn't have to stop here. We have more amazing videos waiting for you. Choose one of the videos popping up on the screen and keep exploring ways to apply Zen techniques and bring more balance into your life. Every step counts in this journey of self-discovery.